And to give you a rounded perspective on this, I'm joined by Ambassador Sanjay Bhattacharyya, the former Secretary of Ministry of External Affairs. Good evening, sir. Now, talking about the current situation, India has strongly reacted to US's latest tariff threat, emphasizing on its India-first approach. What does your analysis speak on India's response?
Well, I think if you would recall, Prime Minister Modi was one of the first visitors to the White House after the inauguration of the US presidency under Trump. And Prime Minister Modi at that particular point of time had offered that the option was actually through bilateral negotiations. And right now, as we speak, we are engaged in bilateral negotiations for an FTA between India and the United States. At such a point of time, to introduce these arbitrary tariffs is rather unjustified. And I think the Indian government has and should react responsibly as well as strongly in such a case. It is quite clear that, in a case like this, to label the issue of Russian imports by India of energy supplies is clearly unjustified, because we are well aware that the European Union has large imports of energy. In fact, its LNG imports increased in 2024 over 2023. The United States itself is a large energy importer of Russian uranium sources for its nuclear program. So at such a stage, to introduce an arbitrary 25% tariff on India is wholly unjustified.
Indeed. And a recent report also says that imposing such tariffs would only harm the US economy and will further impact its market. We would like to understand from you, sir, the repercussions of US's tariffs on the US itself.
Well, any tariff that is imposed in such a manner, and particularly if the Indian side does not wish to reduce the prices, will lead to increase in prices for the US consumer. Because if a certain product, say for example, textiles, is sold at $100, and if today we introduce a tariff of 25%, then that's going to become 125. And who's going to pay for that? It has to be the US consumer. So in a sense, because it is not so easy to diversify the imports that come from India, whether it's in the case of textiles or pharmaceuticals, certain electronic items, it'll become extremely more difficult for the US consumer. I do understand that the tariff will also impose a certain downward pressure on the export price that will emanate from such countries. And there may be some amount of tariff shopping that importers in the United States may encourage and may have to indulge in. But I doubt if that would be very successful in the current scenario, as India continues to be a significant producer and a growing producer of many of these items, often in collaboration. But I think the most important thing is that this would amount to, as I feel, a certain breach of trust of a very strong and growing partnership between the two countries.
Indeed. Do you also think that the US would be able to further stretch it, because the US and European Union both already have trade ties with Russia? Or is this just another move to negotiate on few of the areas?
I think what is probably happening is that the United States and the European Union cannot fathom why India can take an independent position. But I think if you look at history, India has had an independent position for a very long time. And we do not believe that we need to be allies of either or any power, because we can write our own path and our own destiny. And I think some of that has happened, because soon after the announcement of this 25% tariff, there was a much stronger move towards Make in India, in which we look for greater self-sufficiency and reliability of our own domestic production and consumption chains. What we've also pointed out is that this is actually hypocritical, and they should not expect this, as you also have pointed out earlier in this report, that the Europeans and Americans themselves buy a lot of stuff from the Russians. We are actually helping the global economy by buying the Russian oil at such a state.
Indeed. All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Bhattacharyya, for joining us and bringing us a rounded perspective on India's strong statement on tariffs.